Hey YouTube, Carco here. Hey, so I know only about half the backers actually have instant access, and so I wanted to make a video for the other half of you guys so you guys could join in on the fun of Keford. So this world is kind of the second or third, really, major work that I've come up with so far, and I'm going to just go strolling around it and kind of chat with you a little bit while we go explore and see what kind of interesting things happen. A little bit about it. The surface elements here are not something I expected players to actually see. Originally, when I was designing this, the height map up here was intended only to get the optimum amount of light down into the world. I had to spend almost a day or two monkeying with this to get it just right to get enough light in. So we will find ourselves a neat pathway. Somebody's built something here, and just the world being online for a couple days here. So we'll just follow kind of their path. Originally, when I started out to build this world, I intended this whole thing turned out to be a happy accident of serendipity, which is 90% of how the editor and coming up with awesome stuff works. Originally, I had intended to try and build large arches above ground on the surface. If you've ever seen Voxel Sniper, and you've seen the terraforming guides where they use big blobby blocks and layer them, and then you can create giant vaulted arches in your world. You'll see this in things like Algamir, the Solemn Giant, the Minecraft world. That's kind of what I wanted to do, but do it in Oort. But it didn't quite work out that way. So I started messing around with 3D whirly noise and maximizing cave thresholds and pushing the editor kind of to the limits. And in doing so, I got my arches just using caves. And the interesting part about it is that I accidentally stumbled across the config for what is now Keford by doing that. And I was even more excited by what I accidentally came up with than I was with the original design I was going for. And so, as you can see, basically light comes in. I used a little pattern to kind of evenly distribute the holes, and so light's able to get into most of the caves, and thanks to Oort's ridiculously good lighting and light reflection system, which, by the way, solved one of the biggest problems in voxel lighting, because if you ever go look at like terrain control maps that are generated and the overhangs in them, yeah, you'll see like this pitch black underneath the blocks where it'll go from instantly lit to instant darkness, and if you step across it, it's pretty obvious there's a problem, and they pretty much solved that problem, which is ridiculously awesome. So anyways, as we descend further and further down in, you'll see there's different layers within the world, and I'm pretty psyched because one of the things I was asking him for was like, hey, let's go for 512 or larger because there's a lot more you can do if you give me that kind of palette to work with. And initially they were like, maybe, not a big priority, but then after they saw this world, they were like, maybe we should give that some thought. So I was like, yeah! Because with 512 and maybe even 1K, we could do some really interesting things. Like, with 512, that's how they were able to do like huge giant trees that you could walk around inside and in the leaves and branches of, because you, the player, are so small proportionally to the tree. But one of the things I kind of envision is actually large giant trees built by the editor itself. In fact, if that's not a part of the code, I will write the mod for that myself. Anyways, that's kind of what I'm envisioning, is having large tiered worlds, kind of like what you see here, where there's multiple layers to it. And so that's one of the things I'm really psyched about. And the other thing I always think about when I'm walking around inside one of these worlds is that, Oculus support is coming. They said it. They've shown the demo of it, and we know it's there, and they have the prototype code. They just haven't put it in instant access yet. So have to be patient, but don't worry, I'll keep pounding the hell out of them. Anyways, that and the other thing I've been asking for is, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but there's this thing called the Virtuix Omni, which is like a three-dimensional treadmill that you can walk for VR. If we could get the treadmill with the headset, this would be the end-all be-all game. I mean, especially with terrain this immersive and you had the immersion of walking around with your feet as you looked around inside this space, I think that in and of itself would be the end, and the game would be essentially better than most anything anyone's ever done yet. So, but them not content, I think grappling hooks are coming soon too. So I am very excited about that. As you can look back up, you can see the light shining through, which is really sweet. And there are a couple dark spots, but I've minimized the dark patches by kind of shrinking everything down in size. That's why there's no major open spots, but there's also no major dark spots either. So let's see, what else? Let's go over here. The fun thing I've really enjoyed about walking around Keford so far is every direction you go off and you discover something new and completely different that you didn't see the time before, because there's really no good starting path. You just pick a direction, drop down, hope you don't hit anything too deep and kill yourself in the process, and off you go. If you see anything weird in the world like what I just saw over there, odds are that's as a result of the rendering actually kind of having some difficulty. Oh, here's some guys building. Sweet. When they originally tried to render the world the first time, I understand there was a problem of some sort and it broke. So they had to re-render the remaining parts of chunks of the world basically again, and so that's why there's a slight mismatch in a couple spots because of the different seed values used, because the clock obviously was different when they did it. Anyway, so we're just kind of rolling around here. And let's see, this is the second. If you didn't see the other world they uploaded to mine, it was called Korea, which was a really pretty kind of rolling hill treescape where the land was segmented off and kind of almost walled off, where it created little pockets of the world that you can hang out in. And I just love this type of terrain even more. I didn't even think we were going to be able to do something like this early on. I had intended to write some mods to be able to do this, but I kind of stumbled upon it by using the cave system. I just really like kind of magical or mythical or surreal worlds like this where there's vaulted tiers. I can already tell you of the 3 or 4 different prototype maps I've come up with, this is definitely the leading candidate right now for my private server. Korea will probably be the public map so far that I submit, unless of course I come up with something even cooler, but right now this is definitely going to be probably my home world on my private server. So, and then I'm actually going to be refining it. There's some changes I've thought about doing that could make this even better, especially as we kind of improve the generation system. Because one of the other things I've been doing in my spare time is I've been looking at various computer science algorithms for the developers to implement. And one of the ones I found that I suggested to them, and they're actually seriously looking at, is called Gabor noise. And that creates kind of like, depending on how you set the parameters, it's like parallel rolling hills. It almost, if you could think of like sand dunes in your mind, that's pretty close to what Gabor generates. And so hopefully we'll get that implemented soon. The neat thing about Gabor is that you can there's YouTube videos you can go watch on it, but you can create like kind of mishmashed dunes that will be offset slightly so it looks like naturally large dunes on a large scale. And I want to take that and create a world of large valleys with it. And then these giant valleys will have some distortion on them so that you basically will have these distorted giant valleys with giant vistas. And then they've talked about adding discrete objects, which I'm so psyched about. That'd be like if we had pillars that we could plant, almost like a tree is, on top of the height map. And if we had discrete objects, one of the things I want to do is like build that giant valley, and then I want to take these like giant arches, which would be the discrete object, and then layer them across the valleys, and then of course sprinkle in trees and whatnot. But that's another major world concept that I'm excited about. And then let me see, I also want to give a shout out to my one boy, Hippo, one of the other serious developers with the editor, Hippo actually came across the right combination of noise to generate floating islands, which is something I've been, obviously talking about, super excited about trying to pull off. But he did it with us just using the existing editor as is, with nothing else added to it. So that's really impressive, and that's something else that I'm going to be experimenting with here in the coming weeks. Whoa. It's really fun. There's a couple patches in the world that I've found where let's jump into the water, where there's like shallow points in the world that you can stand like right in the water like this, just looking up into the environment, that I think is really pretty. And see, if you look right up there at the very top, you can see the mishmash of why that ugly rock at the top is there. It creates this perfect kind of distribution pattern to get light down in here, so that you can get the kind of illumination you see to be able to walk around and go exploring. Well, I think that's about it for this time. Thanks for joining me, and let's explore Keford, and stay tuned for more.